In the spring of 1992, NBC aired a TV movie they hoped would actually serve as a backdoor pilot for a potential weekly series if the ratings and buzz were significant enough. It was called Steel Justice, and it concerned a grieving detective in a post-apocalyptic city who is granted the magical ability to turn into a giant-sized version of his dead son's favorite toy, a robot dinosaur. Now, this man-turned fire-breathing metal beast is set to dole out a new kind of justice: Steel Justice. Despite this undeniably awesome premise, the movie was not a hit, and the planned series never materialized. A failure to franchise, if you will. If there was a silver lining for the film's producers, it was that they were at least not out the cost of building a giant fire-breathing robo-dinosaur. No, the movie's star attraction had actually already existed before the movie was made. In fact, the entire motivation behind the movie was specifically to act as a sort of star vehicle, no pun intended, for the machine, which was already known and quite famous to a certain segment of the population. The machine, invented in 1989 by Doug Malowicki, was a 48-foot semi-trailer with the ability to transform into a robotic T-Rex and pick up and crush cars with its hydraulically operated arms and grasping claws. It was called Robosaurus, and by the time of Steel Justice, had already become a popular attraction at monster truck rallies, had begun to spawn imitators like Megasaurus and Transaurus, and had even been spoofed as Truckosaurus in the classic Season 2 episode of The Simpsons, Bart the Daredevil. To understand the popularity of Robosaurus around that time, it's important to note the 80s is when the entire monster truck phenomenon really took hold in popular culture. There's much debate over who officially created the monster truck concept, as throughout the 70s several individuals began building and modifying pickup trucks into specialized off-road vehicles with heavy-duty suspension and oversized tires. But the monster truck scene as we know it today is generally thought to have started in 1981, when Bob Chandler filmed the monster truck he had created, which he dubbed Bigfoot, running over and demolishing cars as a promotional video for his four-wheel drive performance shop. The video gained attention, and Chandler and Bigfoot were invited to replicate the feat at several small events around the country. At one of these events, Bob George, one of the owners of a company that would eventually become the United States Hot Rod Association, referred to Bigfoot as a monster truck, and the term stuck. And then, in 1982, Chandler debuted a new version of Bigfoot, with even bigger 66-inch tires, at an event at the Pontiac Silverdome, once again performing the car-smashing event, and officially kicking off the monster truck craze. Bigfoot and a truck called USA-1 had the first ever side-by-side one-on-one monster truck race in 1983, and were soon joined by the likes of King Kong, Virginia Giant, and Mad Dog, in regularly held and often televised races run by TNT Motorsports and the USHRA. Monster truck rallies became big business. In the early 90s, at the suggestion of several drivers such as Dennis Anderson, who created and drove the incredibly popular truck Gravedigger, the races at these events often started being followed by individual exhibition routines, allowing the drivers to show off what their vehicles could do, even sometimes including aerial flips. But even with the excitement of the races, the car crushing, and vehicle aerobatics, fans remained especially pleased if the rally they attended also contained an appearance from Robosaurus. After all, if you're going to go see monster trucks, Robosaurus remained your closest shot at seeing a literal monster truck, as it were. The only thing that could be even better was if an actual monster was inside a truck. But fans would have to wait a few more decades for that, until an ambitious movie producer and his 4-year-old son dared to make that fantasy a reality. The year is 2016, or maybe it's 2017, and Paramount Pictures and Nickelodeon Movies are ready to try their hand at the time-tested boy and his monster genre, and in the process hopefully launch the next big sci-fi family adventure franchise with monster trucks. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris, here for one night only main event this year, Tuesday. Bring the kids, bring the family, and let's fail to franchise.
Nice. I was kind of hoping we'd have something like that in this episode.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Stupid.
I mean, no, well, maybe stupid, but hey, maybe that's apropos for today's episode.
Yeah, totally.
But also, you can already tell we're both in a good mood, and that makes sense because, Chris, this is the merriest time of the year.
Yes,
and of course, I'm talking about Trev and Chris-tmas. Which
my favorite is you thinking it through and
as I say it,
over pronouncing it.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh my god, I got to get this right because I don't want to call you Christ, right? I don't want to say Trev and Christ-tmas.
Even
you've
though,
already got you've got a big enough ego. I don't need to like feed into that.
It's true, and also I don't know if you ever had these as kids, but we were gifted when we were babies little tablets that said like not the 10 commandment tablets, but like religiously based tablets of saying what like your meanings of your name is. And I don't know if you know this, but Christopher means Christ bearer. So you are around greatness right now and always.
Oh. Well, all right.
Okay.
Well, we should explain for those who this might be their first time experiencing this. Trev and Chris-tmas is our annual celebration, obviously the holidays, where you and I like to gift each other movies. And so, if you listen to our previous episode, that's at the end of the episode. We each picked a movie for both of us to watch, but gifting it to the other. And there's always like kind of different reasons we picked the ones we did. And we're starting off with a doozy. This was your gift for me, and we'll talk in a little bit about. Again, we'll talk about why you gifted this to me and where that like kind of impetus came from, because I'm sure people will be wondering what the hell that's all about. But we are kicking off with 2017's Monster Trucks. And I if you notice, I put a lot of emphasis on 2017. There's a reason for that. So, Chris, why don't you tell us about Monster Trucks?
For sure. It is directed by Chris Wedge.
Whoa, Scrat himself?
Yes, a famous Scrat. More greatness on this episode. Amazing. Jesus and Scrat. But Chris Wedge is the voice of Scrat from the Ice Age movies. He also directed Ice Age, and he directed that other DreamWorks movie, Robots, starring Ewan McGregor. This is written by Derek. Oh, it's actually written by a few people, but it's written by Derek Connolly. He is Kellen Trevorrow's writing partner, so he helped to write the Jurassic World trilogy, Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, I know. Moving on. It also has writing partners Jonathan Abel and Glenn Berger. They're sitcom guys, stand-up guys, sketch comedy writers, but they also wrote the Kung Fu Panda trilogy as well as the Trolls movies, so there is some claim to fame there. And then one more writer, Matthew Robinson. He writes for award shows, and he's had a couple features, but none of any real, noteworthiness, respectfully. And we don't like making fun of writers. So.
Slam on Matthew Robinson.
We don't like making fun of writers.
No, we don't.
The budget of the film is a staggering $125 million. Domestically, it made $33 million, and worldwide, it made $64 million. So this was quite a large bomb for Paramount. Yeah. I have a couple of, I love saying stats, especially right off the bat here, but this lost Paramount over $123 million. And it caused their parent company Viacom to take a $115 write-down on the taxes because of, what did it say? It says something like it was related to an expected performance of an unreleased film. So they took a write-down before this movie even came out.
Except I remember when that was like announced and they were like, an unnamed film, and everyone's like, it's Monster Trucks, right? Like it was like, that's the thing. Like, so before we even get into like the whole backstory of like why we chose this or why I was interested, this is definitely one of the movies I was always thinking about when we started talking about this podcast, because this is one of the more infamous modern age bombs. This feels like an oddly full circle moment, because like if you remember our first episode was our origin episode, but our first proper episode was John Carter, and that was also a movie where a prominent computer, like a CGI animation director, decided to make his first foray into live action.
Right.
It was another movie where there's like some other similarities, just to jump ahead a little bit, like where a movie was started by one set of producers at a studio, and by the time it got going, those people were gone, and like no one really cared about it anymore. So it's kind of a lost movie to a certain degree. Both movies got delays, and both movies kind of arrived on the scene already signaled to the audience as disasters. They kind of didn't even have a fair shot to a certain degree. And whether we think the film should have had one, we'll talk about. But to me, there's just like so many like interesting parallels. It's like, this is almost like coming back to our first episode in a way.
Yeah.
The only difference being, of course, John Carter being based on one of the most most famous, influential IPs of all time, and this one being an original idea and a very, very interesting origin to it. But still, I just thought it was kind of neat that I realized those parallels as I was doing the research here.
Totally. And also the reason why I picked this for Trev, I gifted it to him, is throughout this podcast, and every once in a while we both have like little go-to jokes, right? And we have little, we play the hits, and every once in a while Trev will mention to me monster trucks, and like how for some unbeknownst reason to himself that he's like, he just needs to see monster trucks and he needs to dissect it.
And I swear the reason is not just Jane Levy and Samara Weaving. I mean, that'd be good enough, right? Because you could understand that reason at least.
Totally.
But yeah.
Totally.
No, I do want me to say to the reason right now, just to get that out of the way.
Yeah, please.
It's not spoiling anything. It really is like, it's okay. So part of it is, as I mentioned, like for this podcast, I just figured this is one we'd have to get to, right? And it always felt to me like so indicative of what this podcast is. Mm-hmm. But it is true that when this came out, I actually did kind of want to see it because just like John Carter, and you've noticed this about me just in our everyday discussions, even outside of this podcast, Chris, I tend to like want to champion and kind of root for the underdogs a little bit in movies. Mm-hmm. And when something gets like signaled as this is going to be a huge bomb, but maybe it's something like original or like, like a new idea, I'm like, I don't know, maybe they're just being shitty about it. And like, maybe there's something to it.
And there was a huge snark to this movie. The internet snark for this trailer was off the charts.
It was. And in a way where I didn't really even understand that because I thought the trailer was innocuous, not amazing, but I didn't understand that snark. And also, and like I said, in a moment, we'll talk about the interesting origin to it. Now, I know on one hand, people might hear the origin that we're going to say and be like, well, that's proof that this movie shouldn't have been made and it's stupid. But I'm crazy enough that I heard that and I was like, that's pretty interesting, right? Like, I kind of want to see the movie just because of that.
Yeah.
And then finally, like the last thing I'll say is the other thing that actually did intrigue me at the time was I grew up on movies like this, right? This is a movie that's aiming for a very particular kind of 80s Amblin vibe of like, the boy and his pet monster or his friend monster, his friend alien, whatever the case might be. And like, I certainly like plenty of movies like that. So I always had this thought that like, maybe this is one of those movies that's just getting overly shit on because we've segued into like just the superhero world and people don't have any room for like this kind of movie. And so they're being like overly like, sarcastic about it. Now that all said, didn't see it in the theater. I kind of ultimately let the kind of reaction to it once it came out get to me, and then I just never got around to it. I kind of meant to come back around in video or later on streaming. Never did, and then it finally just got to a point where I was like, well, I know I want to do this podcast, So it just became a matter of like, okay, I'll wait, but I'll just say like, we'll talk about our thoughts later. But I definitely went into this still thinking like, maybe there's something here because this seems like a movie on paper that maybe I'll actually end up liking,
Right. Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned the Amblin-y vibe stuff. Not to get into our thoughts or anything, but about those 80s or 90s movies where a young child meets an animal or alien or robot. So I actually listed a couple of them that I remember distinctly from my childhood, watching either many times or ones that really stuck with me. Can I tell you a couple of them?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Obviously, E.T., of course, right?
Mm-hmm. A movie that I think both of us are not like as high on as everyone else. Yeah.
I was just about to say that. I was like, that movie is fine. One I used to watch all the time. Do you know this movie called Prehistoria?
Oh, yeah. I know Prehistoria. Yeah.
I fucking loved Prehistoria. That shit was great about the little kid who finds the dinosaur eggs. And then, anyway, they're like little tiny dinosaurs he keeps hidden from like this evil, like a museum worker or something. I can't remember that guy. He's like an evil guy. Anyway, it always has that, right? There's the evil CEO or the evil scientist or whatever trying to get the monsters. Star Kid. Did you ever watch that?
I never did. I know of it. I remember when that was like every comic book I bought for a while had an ad for Star Kid in the back.
Right.
But I never actually saw it. Yeah.
But yeah, the kid from Jurassic Park. This was his. I mean, maybe we should start.
Joseph Mazzello.
Yeah. Maybe we got to talk about Star Kid one day. I'm not sure.
Maybe. Yeah.
But Dunstan checks in.
Okay.
Do you remember that one with the orangutan?
Oh yeah, of course. Oh,
yeah. Monkey Trouble. I was on a monkey kick for a while there. Andre, the one with the sea lion. Love that one. Of course, Free Willy. Short Circuit, I would put in this category. I know it's not a kid, but, Short Circuit still applies.
No, because like I would also put in, do you know Batteries Not Included?
I have heard of that. I've never seen it.
Yeah, okay. Because that's, again, it's not necessarily a kid, but it's like a whole, like, I think it's like a whole, like, apartment complex in New York, but it's like these little, like, robotic aliens, yeah.
The only other two I mentioned is The Iron Giant, of course. And then this Canadian movie starring Joshua Jackson. I'm not sure if you know this movie, called Magic in the Water. Do you know that?
No, I've never heard of that.
This is a story about a family that is like it's in this lake. I don't know if they're in Ontario or something, but basically they find like their very own Nessie.
Ashley Black is about to discover magic in the water.
Daddy! The monster, he's real. He ate my cookies.
Yeah, I bet.
It's like a Loch Ness monster type thing, but it's like a sweet, obviously cute and cuddly animal.
Yeah.
Magic in the Water, watched that many times. And the reason I wanted to list a few of these off at the top is because why? Right? And there's so many of these movies in the 80s and 90s that are from Trev's childhood, my childhood, which I just told you. And in 2015, 2017, this type of movie hasn't really been tried, since maybe Transformers? Would you say Transformers 2007 really applies here in comparison, right? Like that's really the last gasp that did start a franchise, but it's been a while since we had, the kid and their car, or the kid and their alien, and the kid and their pet. You know what I mean?
Well, it's interesting that even with Transformers, right, like they can't kind of get away from that formula for too long. Like, so when they go into like Bumblebee and even like, what's it? I didn't say Beast Wars, but it wasn't like Rise of the Beasts or whatever.
Rise of the
right?
Beasts, yeah.
They still always want to have like a young character who gets to be friends with the robots because it is just a time-tested, true blue formula that still works. So I'm actually surprised that it has like kind of faded to the degree it has. Hey, I wanted to throw in one more that I don't know if you know about, but if you don't, I'd say it's like a recommendation for you. Do you know the 1995 movie Pet Shop?
I do not know that. Pet Shop.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, so that's one you might want to check out. Yeah, that's like from Full Moon Features, so obviously it's very cheap, but but because you said Prehysteria, that immediately popped into mind because Pet Shop is also about a bunch of aliens that come to Earth and then disguise themselves as like Earth human or as Earth animals, and then like the kids who take care of them. It's all like
great.
puppets, like yeah.
Cool. I love that.
Yeah,
love that.
But yeah, I mean, like yes, it's kind of like I said, I'm just surprised that there aren't just more of these because. And when you say like how there were so many when we were growing up, of course there was, because when you're a little kid, right, the idea of being friends with an alien or being friends with a monster is just so intriguing. When I was a kid, there was like a toy called like My Pet Monster. It's just like why wouldn't? And then even movies like Little Monsters. Like the idea of like, oh, what if there were monsters that were real, but
that was the Howie Mandel one.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, I love that movie. That's a great
movie that like is just locked in my brain because they like pee in a jar and the kid drinks it thinking it's apple juice, and I've never forgot that my whole life. And so every time I go to drink apple juice, I'm worried that might be the case.
Oh, dude, I have not thought about Little Monsters in so long. Oh, I see his makeup with the horns and everything. Wow.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But yeah, like I think everyone. Hey, actually, that's an interesting question, Chris. Just out of curiosity, did you have like an imaginary friend when you were a kid, or did you like kind of actually picture yourself being able to be like friends with any? I know this is kind of two questions, but picture yourself being friends with like these monsters and aliens, like in any sense. Did you have like a toy that you played with to that degree, or how connected were you to this idea?
No, I was quite popular and awesome and had many friends.
Okay,
so
yeah.
I never.
Right. You were dating supermodels already when you were 10, and yeah, you didn't.
No, in a less snarky answer. Still no, but I never. I always had a younger brother, younger sister, so we were close enough in age that I didn't have to be left by my own devices. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, it never really applied to me. But how about you?
No, oddly enough, I never had an imaginary friend that I remember, and like, yeah, I also like, I never even so much. We're gonna talk in a little bit about like toys.
One day, you're gonna wake up in a padded cell, and we've been doing this podcast in that cell, and
you're the imaginary friend. Yeah.
I am the imaginary friend.
You're my drop dead friend.
I'm the booming voice in the intercom telling you to like turn over and eat your peas or something,
But no, like I also never really bought into that. Like I said, like the My Pet Monster, or like My Buddy, I never got those when I was a kid. Like I think I just fell more into right away, like video games and then like other kinds of toys.
Sure.
But yeah, I was just curious. But I said, I certainly was attracted enough to the idea that I loved the movies that were like that. And you would like when you watch the movies, you did picture yourself as like, wouldn't it be fun to be the kids on that adventure?
I think that's a great segue to how this movie even started, right?
Yeah.
And there was a producer that worked for Paramount, Adam Goodman. He conceived of the idea of this movie, Trev, actually not by himself.
No. It was brought to him, and like that happens, right? Sometimes you hear this story all the time, right? Like a producer will be at a dinner party and someone will give them an idea, or you know, like they'll just be like in an elevator. Of course, the elevator pitch is an idea. So, Chris, why don't you tell the audience who brought this idea to Adam Goodman?
Yes, his 3-year-old son.
Yeah.
So basically, this 3-year-old son plays with a lot of trucks, and went up to his dad and said, "Master trucks."
Yeah.
And then he goes, you know what? Let's spend $125 million to make that a reality, son. So Trev, you asked about imaginary friends. Think about when you were a kid and what you were playing with at the time, on your little, your shag carpet or whatever, right? And you yelled, "Mom, Dad, let me come here, have a great idea for a movie." Please tell me, what were the toys that got you going as a kid? What were you playing with?
First of all, good call. We did have shag carpet.
I know.
But just to kind of feed into that, though, like before I even say the toys, like it does make sense, though, right? Because I do remember, and I'm guessing you were like this too, Chris, is that when I played with my toys, I was kind of envisioning them as like movies, right? I was creating these movies in my head.
Always.
So like there is like a certain logic to thinking about a kid like pitching a movie or thinking of this in a movie sense. Like I said, when I was a kid, a lot of my toys were just the popular action figure lines of the time. I had a lot of, like, my brother had the Star Wars toys, and I kind of inherited those because he's 8 years older. But I still, they were still in the house. I remember having that original Millennium Falcon, the one you could open up and put the action figures in.
Oh yeah.
Basically, also, by the way, everything I'm about to say for the next like 5 minutes, I'm so mad that I got rid of and through away. I was just recently at like a nostalgic vintage toy show and just seeing all the things I used to have sitting there now selling for massive prices. But anyways, had all the Star Wars toys. Masters of the Universe, definitely had a bunch of those. Had a lot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles figures, even though it's weird because like I think of it as a franchise I was never super into, but I had a lot of the toys, probably just because everyone was snapping them up. And I'll tell you another franchise that you and I talk about a lot because we've both kind of just been like, why is this a thing to the level it is now? But when I was a kid, I really loved Ghostbusters, of course, right? And in particular, the cartoon. And so I had a lot of those real Ghostbusters cartoons. And then I do remember being young and having like the proton pack that you could wear as a kid and the trap and running around pretending I was a Ghostbuster. That's like one of my stronger memories of like really playing into like the imagination of things.
Cute.
And even to that same degree, you know what else me and some other kids in my neighborhood had is we had the original like laser tag, which was the one where you wore like a little like vest that had like a monitor on it, and then you had the laser gun and like a little helmet, and you ran around your neighborhood shooting at each other. And so that's another one where I remember us kind of like creating like this fictional war that we were fighting in as we ran around our backyards with laser tag. Yeah, so those were like the ones that immediately popped to mind. And then I have to admit, like I guess I'm part of the generation that just a few years later, like Nintendo comes out, and suddenly that's all we have time for, right? It's just like, now I'm just going to sit in my den and play Nintendo all day.
I like the difference of our toys, like because of course, we mentioned all the time that there's a little bit of an age difference between us, and I think it breeds a fun conversation. And I'm a 90s kid, right? And I was saying just before I hopped on to record, I was talking to my fiance, and I was like, man, like she's just 2 years younger than me, so like we grew up at the exact same time. And I was like, remember how fucking crazy the marketing was in the 90s? Where it was just like the loudest commercials of all time screaming at you to buy them.
It's the Creepy Crawler's oven!
It's the Creepy Crawler's super oven!
Wow, mega mool! A super oven and a timer.
It makes bigger, better bugs! And now you can make your own Mighty Morphin Power Rangers!
Cool. It makes super-sized bugs and Power Rangers super fast.
That's why they call it the super oven!
The Creepy Crawler Super Oven comes with everything here. Other mold, plastic goods, and stuff. Your parents put it together like the batteries not included. From Toymax.
It's sometime in the future. The ultimate challenge. Crossfire. Crossfire. You can count the crossfire. Crossfire. You can count the crossfire. 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 You'll get caught up in it. colors. And the GAC copier lets you copy and stretch your drawings. Twirl and mix GAC. Do a GAC sneeze.
Now you've gone too far.
Make GAC creatures. Start a GAC band. How many ways can you play with GAC?
Oh, disgusting.
Nickelodeon GAC Splats and GAC Copier, each sold separately from Mattel.
So they were like just really frenetic and just ADD commercials, really. But I listed a few here, and the nearest and dearest to me, because I have a couple anecdotes. I'm not going to go on a diatribe, I promise. But it's funny, first of all, that you started talking about how we created films in our heads without really realizing it, right? Because I'm going to mention that, of course, I had like all of the Jurassic Park toys, right? I had Jurassic Park toys. I had the Lost World toys. I even so much when 2001, when Jurassic Park 3 came out in 2001, I was older. I was, too old for toys anymore, but I still needed to go buy one, kind of just to like keep the dream alive. You know what I mean? So I remember doing that. But what I used to do with my Jurassic Park toys, which I still have, by the way, those I have kept, thank God, because a lot of them are, of course, so out of print, but they do have value to them. Yeah. Not that I'd ever sell them. But it's nice to know that they're not just collecting dust for no reason. You know what I mean?
Is that the ones? Can I have this like memory of the Jurassic Park toys having that really weird feature where like you could pull chunks off of the dinosaurs?
It's called Dino Damage, baby. I have it written down. Yeah, it's Dino Damage. So like on the T-Rex and all like that, especially it was like a fleshy material that was on the dinosaurs, and you can pull off their like rib cage and shit. And yeah, it was called Dino Damage, which was so funny. But yeah, my sister had this big dollhouse that was probably like 4.5 feet by like 3 feet. It was like this huge fucking dollhouse that she had. And what I used to do is I would play with it, but I would play with it with my Jurassic Park toys and basically just like fucking killing the whole family. and then I realized while I was writing the notes, I go, that was the plot of Fallen Kingdom.
Yeah.
So I wrote that movie. So Jurassic Park toys, absolutely loved. Of course, the next ones, Beast Wars, Transformers. These were my Transformers.
Oh, so, yeah. I played with Transformers, too, and GoBots. I should have mentioned that, yeah.
But that's so funny, because you already mentioned Rise of the Beasts, right? Which was the Beast Wars,
Yeah, I was too old for that, yeah.
Yeah, and that was mine. Like, that's how I got into Transformers, was the Beast Wars line. Dude, these were my most treasured toys. I think I had every single one. When they became evolved versions of themselves, they called them Transmetals, and there was Transmetals 2s, and they would just get bigger and badder and fucking sweet. I had so many. I have a few left, because one day I came home from school, and my mother got rid of them, and I was heartbroken. And still this day, I don't really know why she did. It was one of those declutter moments, and you just... that's what parents do sometimes. But anyway, those are my most treasured. I used to... This is actually a treasured or cherished memory of mine, is my grandfather was always amazed by them. And I used to transform them like back and forth with like, but just by memory, Mm-hmm. And I was like 6 and 7, I was quite young. And I remember like my grandfather would just be like, hey, go get like a bunch of them and like show me. So I'd bring out like 15 Transformers, and I would just transform them all by memory, and he was just blown away. And that was just a cool memory of mine. I loved Connects instead of Lego. I wasn't a big Lego kid. I was a Connects guy. Did you guys have Connects in Canada?
I was gonna say, is that some BS Canadian Lego or something? I don't know. You know what? I mean, maybe we did. I just don't know. My family we had enough money to afford Lego, so.
but you didn't have friends.
No.
Dude, Lego's expensive. Okay. But Connects is it's K''NEX if you wanted to Google it. It's like a bunch of it's a different type of builder sets. It's like rods and stuff like that. Anyway, but you can build like huge towers and like roller coasters, and there was like mechanized versions or motorized versions. That shit was awesome. As a 90s kid, dude, Tech Deck fingerboards.
I remember those. Yeah.
These were sick. And I wasn't really good at them, but like all of my buddies had them in elementary school and even junior high. And like the teacher would be talking in school, and all of a sudden, like just everybody would just be with their tech decks, like on the desks and like outside in the playground. And oh man, tech decks were sick. Did you have Pogs growing up?
Oh my God, I was just about to say, because you brought up tech decks, I wanted to cut in and be like, okay, you brought up tech decks, I have to ask, did you have Pogs?
Dude, Pogs were so much fun, and you would collect slammers, you'd have a metal or plastic one, then you'd trade them for better ones. And then I had a Pog maker. That's how rich we were. Okay, never mind. But I had a Pog maker that I would just make my own discs. I guess that would be if I'm poor, right?
Yeah, you can't look. Just sink all of your savings into the Pog maker, and I don't have to worry about buying the official Pogs.
I thought about it for a second. I was like, hold on, that's what you would get a peasant kid. Oh my God. Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, I was really cool. I had like newspaper Pogs.
I had the funny pages. Dude, Pogs are sweet. What is another one? Crash Test Dummies. Did you ever have these? Remember they made there was an action figure line for Crash Test Dummies.
Well, I remember there was a brief moment when I was younger. I didn't know if that went into the 90s, because I remember it was more of an 80s thing when like the Crash Test Dummies actually became like kind of TV characters. Like there was a bunch of like commercials with them and stuff. And I even so my dad, when I was growing up, worked for Ford Motor Company.
Oh, no shit.
And we went to like Ford events when I was a kid. And I remember going to an event as a kid. Well, oh my God, this is so interesting because, dude, Chris, this just unlocked something so crazy in my mind. I gotta tell you, we went to an event that the Crash Test Dummies were there. It was like two guys like in the costumes. But as I said that, it just clicked in my head.
They blew apart in front of you.
No. But you know what else was at that event? And I remember this now suddenly as a kid.
Yeah.
The monster truck Bigfoot was there.
No
I remember,
shit.
Yeah, because I remember like getting and like crawling up on the wheel and everything, and like So
that's
both
awesome.
Those things, yeah.
Wow, crazy. Wow, memory lane. Yeah. I love this.
I know, yeah.
Nerf guns, super soakers. Those are always fun.
Super soakers, yeah.
Oh man,
did you feel like you always got like a super soaker and you're so happy, and then somebody got like the next better model?
Always.
You like never had the right super soker? Yeah.
All of a sudden, the neighbor had one that you didn't have to pump action, and you're like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Why is this one motorized? Just a couple more rattle off. Tamagotchis and Digimon version of Tamagotchis. Those were sweet. I have a memory, like, you remember Tamagotchis, right? Like the little pocket monsters?
Yeah, but again, like, I was kind of like, by the time they came along, it wasn't,
sure.
I wasn't getting into it, yeah.
I remember the Digimon one, you had to shake it to evolve, right? And you can connect it with your friends' other Digimon, and they would fight. And you would gain XP and all this other shit, right? But I remember, and now thinking about it as a grown man, I used to leave my class to go to the washroom, quote unquote, to shake my Digimon.
This is a euphemism, right?
Believe me, Digimon was evolved. The other two, obviously Furbies. My cousin worked at Toys R Us, so when the Furby craze happened, he actually got first dibs on a couple of them, so we didn't have to like wait during that incredibly huge cultural onslaught that was the Furby. Yeah. And nowadays, Furbies, I know they came back a few years ago. You see that they're all like digitized, and you got to like link it to a fucking iPad and get an app. Right? I hate it. Yeah. The last one I wanted to mention, because people don't know about these, there was a TV show on YTV in Canada, and I can't remember the production company now, but I just watched a long documentary about it. But they made the show Reboot. Mm-hmm. And I know Reboot did start to creep into the States. It was never huge in the States, but it creeped in.
Yeah, I remember it.
But they were the company that made Beast Wars. And then they also made a third a series that was lesser known because it didn't really fly, but I used to watch it. It was called War Planets. And what these war planets were there was like factions, and they would fight. You get the lava planet and the fucking green planet, and whatever. They had armies and militias and stuff. Well, they made War Planets toys, and they're like Polly Pockets for boys. So like you would get this big like dome planet that had like, let's say, tentacles and shit on it, and you would open it up and you'd have all your little figurines, and they were like, again, aliens and militias and like, you know, just generals, and it was just so much fun. I loved the War Planets line. It's just it was kind of a deep cut one that came back to my memory, and I thought, you know, check those ones out. That was fun, because Polly Pockets had a huge run. My sister loved those, but War Planets, that was there for the boys.
Yeah, the Polly Pocket for boys I remember is, do you know Mighty Max?
I know the name. I was never, it wasn't a thing for me.
Okay, because that was very much like Polly Pocket for boys. It was the same thing, right? Where you bought like a skull or something and opened it up, and then there was like a haunted house in there and Mighty Max figurines and things. As you were talking, a few more came to mind. Can I just kind of quickly, because I should have mentioned these before. Like, was Mighty Machine still a thing when you were like younger, or no?
Mighty Machines were just like little cars and stuff. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it's so weird. They were basically like, it's like, here, kids, here's choking hazards in plastic.
Yes,
right.
yes.
They were like there's some very tiny toys that you could swallow like immediately. Obviously, the very famous Mighty Machine Man, like in the Mighty Machine guy in the commercials. Guy talked really fast, you know, about Mighty Machines.
Yeah.
This is the Micro Machine Man presenting the most midget miniature motorcade of Micro Machines. Each one has dramatic details, terrific trim, precision paint jobs, plus incredible Micro Machine pocket playsets. There's a police station, fire station, restaurant, service station, and more. Perfect pocket portables to take any place. And there are many miniature playsets to play with, and each one comes with its own special edition Micro Machine vehicle and fun, fantastic features that miraculously move. Raise the boat lift at the airport marina, man the gun turret at the army base, clean your car at the car wash, raise the toll bridge. And these playsets fit together to form a Micro Machine world. Micro Machine pocket playsets, so tremendously tiny, so perfectly precise, so dazzlingly detailed, you'll want to pocket them all. Micro Machines and Micro Machine pocket playsets sold separately from Galoob. The smaller they are, the better they are.
Also, a big one when I was a kid is, do you know Muscles? Or just Muscle? Like, it's like an acronym, like M.U.S.C.L.E.
No, I don't.
Oh, man. You should look these up. They were so cool. There were these like tiny little pink figurines, and it was like the thing where there was like just so many of them. And what they were supposed to be was they were basically wrestlers, but they were like these kind of like supernatural wrestlers. And you were trying to collect them all, and like you would buy. They came in like garbage cans. You'd buy these like garbage cans and open up the garbage can, and it was like an early blind box. You didn't know which muscle men you're going to get in there, so sometimes you ended up with like doubles. But then there was also like alternates of certain ones where like one little thing was different, and like those were really cool. And then there was another thing
real quick to your Mighty Machines, or what were they called again? Mighty Machines?
Yeah, Mighty Machines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that the one with the big van? Remember the big van that unfolded and you had little cars and stuff? My brother had that. Was that Mighty Machines or Micro Machines? Fuck, what are they called?
Oh, Micro Machines. That's what I meant to say. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I called them Mighty Machines. Yeah, Micro Machines. Yeah, I didn't know that there probably were carriers. I just remember having all like the really tiny vehicles. And Chris, this is not going to surprise you. It had to come up, and I promise I'll just say this: did I have Star Trek Micro Machines? Yes. Do I still have Star Trek Micro Machines? Yes.
Will you continue to have more? Yes.
Well, they're not going anywhere. You know, they're in the apartment right now. And then another one that I just vaguely remember is there was a thing called, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe they're called Elementals. And again, they were like these like little tiny figurines, but the idea was they were animals, right, in armor. So you get like a deer, but it's like a deer in armor, and then like a bear and everything. And they all had a sticker on the front of them, and it was a heat activated sticker. And what you would do is you would pit them against each other. You'd take your deer and put it against someone's like giraffe, and you'd rub the sticker. And like it was basically playing rock paper scissors, but it was with the elements. And it was like, this one has fire, so he burns wood. Oh, but my wood like blocks your water. It was like so weird, but I remember those as well.
Two toys I would have brought into the bathroom as well to rub together.
You know what? Stop rubbing your Digimon over there, or shaking your Digimon or whatever.
Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. Man, toys. You know,
toys, man. Yeah,
like it's funny because again, we this is such a we're gonna talk about it. It's a silly movie, you know, but it's funny that a 3-year-old's imagination, you know, spawned this epic disaster.
Well, and that's what I mean. Like that was the element I was talking about earlier, where I knew that, like, right, that was part of like, I heard that when this movie started getting going, and then when people were kind of like mocking the movie, but I knew that was the story, right? Oh, this guy's like young kid came up with the idea, and that sounded intriguing to me because, yes, we can say like obviously that's crazy folly to like sink 125 million into a movie that your 3-year-old son came up with,
right?
But there's also the part of me that thinks that's so insane it's kind of interesting. And to what we were just saying, we just went on for so long about how much we loved our toys and the powerful imagination of a kid. Hollywood tries so hard constantly to make these movies for kids. isn't there maybe, can't you see that slightest bit of logic there? Just saying like, I don't know, just let the kid do it, just let the kid create what he wants to see. Maybe this will actually work. So there was a part of me that was like, that's kind of neat. You don't often get a movie where it's like, yeah, my 3-year-old came up with this concept, and not like, let's roll the dice on it. So I was just always kind of curious how that would actually turn out. And I mean, obviously it didn't turn out well for them financially, but we'll talk later about beyond that.
I got to mention here, because you brought this up to me today, actually, we were texting. And not only did this kid's idea become this huge $125 million film, it also got quite a bit of talent to sign up for this movie.
Is this like this is one of the most star-studded movies we've ever done, isn't it? It was crazy. Yeah.
Can I just list? I have a certain few to list. Listeners, if you know them, then great. If a couple you might not know, but just know that this is a stacked cast. Okay. So first, well, we'll start with the main guy, Lucas Till. I mean, he's not, he's not the main star, but he's, this
you'd recognize him.
You'd recognize him. Jane Levy, same deal. Amy Ryan is in this.
Yeah.
Rob Lowe, Danny Glover. When Danny Glover showed up, so me and Brittany, my fiance, watched this film together, and I kind of screamed at the TV. I was like, "Holy shit, Danny Glover's in this movie!" Barry Pepper is in this. I love Barry Pepper. I just watched. I rewatched Crawl. From it was, what is that, 2019? He's the dad in Crawl. I love. He's a great actor. Holt McCallany. He's a great actor too. He was just in that the Iron what is it called again? He was the dad with the wrestlers.
Oh yeah, Iron Claw. Yeah.
The Iron Claw, yeah. And he was quite he had a presence in that film. So he's awesome. We have Frank Whaley. We have Thomas Lennon from Reno 911. What else we got? We got Samara Weaving that pops up here for like a nothing role, but she became, she's not a household name, but she's worked with some of the best filmmakers out there right now. So again, stacked cast. Am I missing anything?
Yeah. No, I mean, well, those are the main ones I would point to. And it was crazy because I went into it remembering that Lucas Till was in it. And like, I think for you and I, like we said, you would recognize them. I guess to most general audiences is probably that he starred in that MacGyver reboot, which in my head, I never cared about, right? Because I never really cared about the original MacGyver.
Sure.
And like, it was just today that I learned, looking at some information about him, I just assumed that like, oh, they did a modern MacGyver. I bet you he played like MacGyver's son. No, it was like a full reboot, right? He was playing the same character. But I was like, oh, I wonder, that was probably like a 1 season or whatever. No, that ran 5 seasons. That was a very successful show. So I'm guessing that's what most of the world would know him as. But obviously for you and I, like when this movie came out, I was like, oh, it's Havoc. It's Havoc from the X-Men movies. Right?
Yes,
like he's X-Men First Class and like the rest of that series. So that's basically what I knew him from. So I went in this remembering that he was in it and knowing that Jane Levy was in it. And if I remember that any of these other people, or if I ever knew that any of these other people were in it, I totally forgot. Right? Like, so I don't know if you were having the same experience, because I did not look at much before I started watching it. So every time when these people popped up, I was just like, seriously? Like that person too? And like, some of them, it really does become a question of like, why? Why did you bother? Like the one I would say that for, just even before we get to the review, the fact that Amy Ryan is in this and has basically one scene is just kind of like mind blowing. But yeah, it's just like, I couldn't believe how crazy stacked this cast was.
I will say one of my favorite lines of the film, which again, we usually save this kind of stuff, but Amy Ryan has probably the best line, one of the best. She looks at her son and goes, "I'm going to the Loaf and Go. Do you want anything?" And me and Brittany laughed at that, because right after he's like, "Just give me a truck." Anyway, when we first started, Trev put an emphasis on 2017 being the release date. We said that it was incepted in 2013, but it was slated for May of 2015, pushed back to December of 2015. Thank God they moved it, by the way, because Star Wars was being redone. Force Awakens was coming out that month.
Thank God they moved it so that they could have a much bigger success later.
Hey, keep your thank gods to yourself. I get to define when to thank God. Remember, I am the Christ bearer. Okay. Then it was delayed to March 2016, and then finally, January 2017. And do you want to know the reason why it was delayed so many times? Well, it had a disastrous test screening because they originally designed the monsters in this film. There's 3 of them. They designed them quite monstrous. And I think the child audience was terrified. So
Yeah.
they went back to the drawing board to completely redesign them, completely redo the effects, and it just kept pushing and pushing. And I learned in the research here that this is, again, one of these hybrid films, right? Like these CGI hybrid movies, kind of like a Smurfs or like an Alvin and the Chipmunks, right? But Paramount was just starting to get in the animation game here. So if you're telling the animators you got to redesign and your animation company isn't even really started yet, it's not good. It's a recipe for disaster. They have a line. They had said something that they had like a small staff of maybe 10 people to, organize what was live action and what was CGI, and they had to farm out to many, many other companies to get the animation correct. So, this movie was kind of a fly by the seat of your pants there, and then a rush to a release date, which inevitably changed. And then Adam Goodman, the guy who came up with the movie, he was fired. So
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to earlier, right? It's one of those cases where he was there through the production, but by the time the movie was wrapped and as it was getting ready for release, he's out of there, right? And this is just like we've had so many movies like this. It's like one of the ultimate frustrating stories in Hollywood, I think. Whenever you hear about this, where like someone shepherds a project and then they leave, and like the next person, it's this really weird thing. I don't know about you, Chris, but I've always had the mentality that if I took over a studio, I would not sabotage those projects. I would be just happy to take credit for anything that works. And it's just always been weird to me that there's always this mindset of saying like, no, I'm not the guy who started that, so I don't want to like support it at all. It's like, who cares? You're just shooting yourself in the foot, right? Like your stockholders are going to be happy if like the company has a hit movie. So just like push it along. But the next person in line is always like, well, that movie is just like this strange albatross on us now that we barely want to, have anything to do with. And that's what happened to Monster Trucks here as well. As it, like you said, as it also just kept getting delayed and kind of like reshot. They really just seemed like they had no idea what to do with it.
No. And that was evident in the marketing. Like we talked about, the marketing was panned across the internet. What I think people close to the studio called it the orphan of the studio, this movie, because everybody kept forgetting about it and then casting it to the side. It just didn't have a good go to reach the screens. And as you alluded to earlier too, like, and to give them the slightest bit of credit, like Paramount was having like a really hard time at this point too, right? Like they'd had a couple of like big like bombs or like underperformers, like the last like Star Trek movie had just come out and not performed to the level they wanted it to, and so they were like kind of just like really struggling to find like something to hit. And I'm sure, the fact that this movie, like, it lost its, like, main champion, it had to go through all these reshoots. They probably were just, like, so extra gun-shy about this one at a certain point, And no pre-existing IP, no canon, nothing to go back to the drawing board with. This is an original idea, which, you gotta give it up. You got to give it up.
Well,
not many $125 million original ideas are getting made.
So that's the thing. You have to give it up. And honestly, like I said, when it came out, I was already in 2017, January 2017, so 2016, I was already at the point where I remember saying to people, like, I don't know, I'm kind of interested in Monster Trucks because it's like an original one, Like I was already starting to hit. This is even worse today, obviously. You and I are just, like everyone, just so sick of like the deluge of IP, right? How that's just everything that studios care about. But even in 2017, I was like, I don't know, it's kind of cool. This is like an original idea that could become a new IP. So that's the question that kind of does hover over this, right? As in a moment, we'll talk about our thoughts on the movie and everything. But the ultimate question is, was one of this movie's biggest like failures or faults that it was being released at this time where nobody had time for like a new piece of IP? Like what would this movie's fate have been in the 80s or 90s when people were more willing to accept a new idea? I don't know. It's interesting to think. Obviously the movie is still the movie, but that's obviously, I'm sure, a part of it. Yeah.
I mean, I gotta ask you, Trev. This is your film. This is my gift to you. So I think I gotta ask you about it, and I think we gotta talk about it.
Sure.
Hey, Trip. Hey, Sam. You want to see something crazy? This place is flipping out right now. Told you never seen anything like this.
Local residents have reported numerous sightings of an unidentified creature.
We're looking for something unusual, something dangerous. What are you? There's something going on here. I don't even know how to begin to explain.
Take a look. He likes hiding in my truck.
This thing is awesome, but it's smart.
It is an engine for my truck.
Isn't that right, Creech?
You named him Creech? Think you can keep up with me? You got it!
You see that?
Show off! Aren't you curious about where it came from?
I'm gonna get you home and away from whoever's after you. I love you too.
Trev, watch out! Now's a good time to take charge!
Let go! I can see better than you! Hey, get back in there!
Trev touched his eye!
Trip, this man might have a word with you.
I'm not going anywhere with you. Yes, you are. The monster is in the truck!
Whoa! Did you see that?
Did that just happen?
Oh, yeah, it did.
I'm a scientist. I want to help you. We're a family.
What do you need? Trucks.
Hope you picked something up from watching me.
A week ago, you were riding a bicycle.
Oh, I really hope they have their seatbelts on.
Let's go!
Okay, Creech, let's get you fed.
I like your truck.
Thanks.
Terravex Oil is in the midst of a fracking operation when disaster strikes, leading to the release of 3 subterranean creatures. 2 are captured by the evil oil company, but one of them escapes the site. Meanwhile, high school senior Trip is looking to escape his boring life. He's so concerned with leaving town that he can't even see that his classmate Meredith is crushing on him so hard. While working late at night at the local junkyard, Trip encounters the escaped creature, now named Creech, and immediately develops a bond with one another. Trip and Meredith must now hide Creech from the sinister oil company, as well as help him reunite with his kin.
Okay, monster trucks. Chris,
Did you expect a plot like that for this movie?
Well, hold on a second. I'll answer that question as I review the movie, right? Because that very much ties into my thoughts on the whole enterprise, right? So as I said, I went into this with the most open mind possible because I knew it was a huge disaster. I knew its reputation, but I also knew that I like plenty of movies like that, you know, and that like I said, there was always a part of me that has hoped maybe this is maybe misunderstood or whatever, right? And Chris, I don't normally like to do this. I don't normally love to farm out my reviews, but I will do this one time, right? When I watch a movie, I tend to then to hop on Letterboxd and see what other people have said about it.
Sure.
And I just want to read. This isn't the full review this person wrote, but Buddy O wrote a review of the movie, and I just want to read you his kind of conclusion on it. He said, "Seriously, with all the production trouble and multiple release dates, it didn't end up being the steaming pile of shit I expected. It was an adequate family film." And I was like, yeah, that's kind of where I come down in that adequate is doing a lot of work right there. On one hand, sometimes we say these are the kind of movies we don't like to talk about, but I actually think we will have a lot to talk about this one. But I did kind of just walk away from it going well, that was perfectly serviceable for what it was. So I kind of agree that it's not as bad as its reputation would have you believe. And I don't think it was worthy of the vitriol and the overwhelming amount of snark it received when it came out. But at the same time, there is something quite clearly missing to make it as magical and wondrous and appealing as all the movies it wants to be and it's trying to pay tribute to. And I have my thoughts about what that is, and I'll get into it as we get more into the discussion. But I very much walked away from it going, well, that was fine. I certainly didn't hate it. I think it's very watchable. But I'll never revisit it. And ultimately, I'm just glad I finally saw it so that we could talk about it on this show and so that I can have kind of a perception of it for because I said, I always think these kind of movies are interesting because I think it's interesting that this movie exists and the whole backstory of it. But it's very much just kind of an average family film. And it's sad because I think you can see the potential within it a lot, right? There's multiple sequences where you go oh, if they just did this, if they just tweaked this, oh god, this would be so close to actually being this really fun movie worthy of rediscovery and cult status. But I just kind of walked away going, well, all right, that was fine. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to getting more into specifics, but that's kind of my main takeaway. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it.
Sure. What do you think I'm gonna say?
I mean, I was just assuming you would have kind of the same take. I was like, I don't know, like maybe, like, here's the thing. This is the kind of movie where if you end up saying, like, you're either going to agree with me or there's two other options, and I'm not going to dispute either of them. If you come in and say, boy, Trevor, I think it was like a huge pile of shit, right? I'm gonna put up like the slightest defense, but not like a hardcore one.
Sure.
But if you say you like really got into it, I could understand that as well, because maybe there's just something about it that does tie into like what you're really into as a kid, or, you know, because it's, like I said, the elements are there. So I am curious to hear. I have to admit, I went into this assuming you'd kind of fall in the same realm of me, of just being like, yeah, it was fine. So lay it on me.
So I watched this with my fiance, and we rarely watch these movies together because she just can't handle it. So this one, though, we've had a little bit of an emotional couple weeks in our family, especially with my pet, my pet dog R2. We've had an emotional week, and he's still around. But that might be changing soon. But we had a little family viewing of this movie with me, Brittany, R2 the dog, and Willow the cat. And you know what? I really, really like this movie. And I just felt, not to use the emotional terrorism against you, to say that I was watching it with my family. But honestly, man, I felt like this was like the perfect little Sunday movie that I required to get back in the swing of things for the podcast. And I just found, me and Brittany both did, we found it just so light, playful, and just a nice little time.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I know you know what I'm saying, I just really liked it. Like, I'm not saying this is a 4-star masterpiece or nothing.
Yeah, that's what
I'm not even going to be overzealous about it. I'm just going to say, honestly, basically what you are saying. It knows what it is. It's succeeding fairly well at what it's trying to do. It's not becoming this memorable, you know, Free Willy, but you know what? It gave me a little bit of the feels of Free Willy every now and then, and I think the performances are actually quite good. I think Lucas Till kind of surprised me. He doesn't have the frenetic, chaotic Shia LaBeouf as Sam Witwicky in Transformers energy. But you know what Lucas Till does do in this film, just like what Shia does in Transformers, is that he sells it. And I think that Lucas Till sold it well enough for me to buy that creature was around. And you know who else really sold it and is the MVP of the movie, in my opinion, is Jane Levy. I think she is so sweet, so adorable, just charming, innocent, just such a great foil for Trip, because like she's obviously so into this guy and just wants to like just hang out with him. And it's not even like a they don't push like any sexual anything, but you can tell just she's crushing on him so hard. But yet this guy
this is one of my problems with the movie. Like, if you're giving me a character who Jane Levy is crushing on and he can't see it and doesn't react to it, I'm never gonna like this guy. I can't get behind this character.
I know, you're like a missed opportunity. You're like, bro, come on, put the fucking squid away. But no, I just found it was just really pleasant and lighthearted. And me and Brittany were we laughed quite a bit at things. Like, some of the action is just so silly and stupid that it just kind of becomes a live action cartoon, but it works. And it's got like some simplistic messaging that works for kids. This is a movie that I was like, man, if I did have a toddler, this is a movie that I'd be like, oh, I hope they like this. You know what I mean? And I think it plays well. So,
well, I'll tell you, because I watched this with my wife, as I tend to do with these movies, and I will say, like, as soon as it ended, one of the main things I said was, the movie, again, credits came on, and I said, man, if I was 10, I would have loved that.
Yes.
You know, and that's to the movie's credit, right? Because that is what it's mostly aiming for. And to just quickly feed off of some of the things you said before I get into some other specifics, I do think this movie is usually at its best during its action sequences. I think the action for a movie where you know that they had to kind of go back and like reshoot things and like redesign everything, whenever it's just like really cutting loose with like the monster in the truck controlling the truck, like, and the rampaging through the town, or the big action like climax at the end with the multiple monster trucks being chased by like the goons and everything.
It's awesome.
That stuff's it's really good. Yeah, it's like it's really fun. It's really exciting.
You never lose track of the action either. I felt the staging was really good because it's an animation guy. right?
There was a point at the end where I was like, oh my God, I think our heroes are like murdering dozens of people during this climax.
Yes.
But yeah, no, that action's really good, and there is some decent humor. Like, so that's the thing. Like I said, like I'm not disagreeing with you. I do think. And I will say this too, like, even though I'm kind of like, I'm obviously more cool on it than you are to a certain degree, but as I said, I don't dislike it. I just kind of like, yeah, it's fine. I will say, I think this movie has actually benefited from coming to it today. And, we're not that far removed from it, but even like the difference in Hollywood and the difference, I was just talking about this earlier, the difference in what kind of movies we get, even from 2017 to today, it's gotten so much worse and so much more dire. And so there was a part of me watching it now going like, well, okay, this isn't great, but it's also not the same, two pieces of IP I've had fed to me for the last 5 years, right? This is trying to create something new. So I did like it on that level, and like that, that's why it is a shame that like, I wish it was just a little better so it could have like become an actual franchise. Well, I'm kind of giving away my thoughts at the end there, but I do think it's like, it's actually kind of more pleasant to watch today because it actually does feel like an antidote to some of the other stuff we've had.
I couldn't agree more. There were so many times that I looked at Brittany and I said, man, look at them driving through Vancouver.
Yeah.
And I was like, they're actually in the mountains. Hey, they're actually in the forest. Oh, they're actually driving these trucks. It's not green screen in a dome. These are real stunts. These are real drivers. These are real crashes and real explosions. And, it's just something that really is lacking nowadays. Mm-hmm. And I think there's just something extra special about watching a movie like that nowadays.
And yes, the creatures aren't practical, like they're all CGI, but
they look great.
That said, now you said that Jane Levy is the MVP, and I'll more or less agree, but let me throw another candidate in for MVP. Creech.
Yeah.
You know what? I actually did fall in love with Creech. Creech actually he's really cute. Mm-hmm. He's really kind of lovable. And like, so like that works. And ultimately for like whatever else I say about the movie, you have to consider it's ultimately, there is a level of success to it because I don't know what those early tests were like. I kind of want to see the original footage to see how ugly and scary the original version was. But like, good on them for coming up with a really effective redesign because it is hard to make a slimy sea monster tentacle creature cute and lovable.
Yeah.
But they pulled it off. Like Creech actually, it's kind of surprising to me. And I guess this is a something to be said about them kind of botching the marketing. And also, like we said, just the unfortunate avenue of coming out with like this story already told of your movie, and coming out with so much bad buzz. But I do feel like if more kids had just seen it, I do think kids would have fallen for Creech because like he is a lovable idea. And like, sorry, the concept of him being wrapped up in the truck and controlling it is awesome and done well here. So yeah.
There's a little bit of like bioluminescence tech magic involved with his tentacles and how like they're subterranean, so they feed on oil and like that makes sense. And Trev, it's been a long time, but I love my rules.
What are the rules? What are the rules? What are the rules? What are the rules?
I love rules in movies, and you know what? You give me a subterranean squid creature, and you say that it needs to drink oil. That's great. And then you feed it gasoline, and guess what happens? They get highly caffeinated and go crazy because it's not a pure product. And I think that's fun as hell. Also, the design of Creech, I want to go back to that for a second. Very reminiscent if you took like Stitch and Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon, put them together, threw on some tentacles. There's something about that bulbous whale dolphin-like look that is just very endearing. I mentioned Free Willy a couple times, but there's even a couple scenes that remind me of Free Willy in this. And the Creech really, really works. And the animation that went into giving it personality is very, very well done. I watched this YouTube channel. I've mentioned it a bunch of times on this podcast called Corridor Crew. And they're like, they do a lot of VFX artist reacts videos. So I've been over the years, I'm such a huge fan, but over the years, I've become so attuned to what makes great visual effects or what makes them horrible. And this movie, I never questioned the creature. I never sat there being like, oh, that thing is not there. I thought that the lighting was perfect. And especially to do it outside. Like I said, this whole movie's taking place outside.
outside and often in the day too. Like when we first meet Creech, it's at night, and you're like, okay, yeah, that CGI creatures always look better at night, right? But this movie has the confidence to be like, yeah, but actually most of it will be in the daytime. Most of our big action sequences will be in the day. Like Creech will be out in the daylight quite often, and it still works, right? So yeah, it's definitely I mean, it's a $125 million budget. Obviously, that was too high, but it is there on the screen. You know, like it's not. We talked about all the actors that were in it. These are good actors. These are actors you like seeing. There's nobody here that's commanding the majority of the budget, you know. No. So the budget is obviously in the CGI, and obviously I know part of that comes from the fact that they had to redo it all, but still, even on the redo, it turned out really, really well.
There's just a charm. There's a charm here, and I think of a movie that's been left behind, you know. And again, this movie isn't the be all end all, but it sets out, or sorry, it does what it sets out to do. I want to ask you, so what are things that you just took it down a notch? I want to hear stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm just so curious.
So yeah, that's what I would get to right here, because so like I said, I ultimately agree with you. However, I do think, you know what I thought this movie was missing is I feel like it was missing like 2 or 3 more scenes of like just like fun and chaos, like the kinds of like ones we talked about where like, you know, like the chase scene in the middle, and then like near the end, but even just more like I wanted to see more Creech antics. I do think, and I think so. This is, I think my takeaway from this movie is that its biggest faults are that it's this type of movie being made in the 2010s and not in the 80s. Because we do kind of exist in a time where Hollywood films are always so obsessed more with like dynamic storytelling and like building a mythology and like setting up stuff for like future franchise stuff and everything, right? That if an 80s version of this, like a lot of the movies we were talking about earlier, like the movies from the 80s and 90s, they would just be like, yeah, whatever. We have the barest bones of a plot, and like we really just want to watch the kid fuck around with his monster.
Yeah, they rip a line of coke.
Oh my god! There would be more scenes where he has to take Creech into town, like the scene at the gas station, right, where he's like filming a gas station, and you can kind of see him. There would be like more scenes like that, right, like where he just kind of goes into town, he's trying to hide him. A scene where Creech is like, I think of the scene in Transformers, to use that as like a comparison point, where like Transformers are trying to hide at the house when the parents are there. Yeah, there's like just more stuff like that, and I think anytime this movie gets bogged down in like the Teravex storyline, that's where I kind of started to check out, and I think it takes up a little too much time of the movie. So that's my biggest fault. Is like, I get that you need a villain, and you said it's like a very basic villain story that more or less works. There came a certain point where you talked about the rules working for Creech, and I agree. I know I'm overthinking the kids' movie monster trucks. I definitely was questioning, like, why did Rob Lowe want to kill these things so much? Because even if you're like an oil man who just cares about the oil, you would recognize the potential profit in like discovering this new species and like. But that's
too heady. That's too heady for a kid.
I know, but
you just gotta say this evil man who has evil oil wants to kill this cute, cuddly creature, and that's all you. I get. Believe me, I agree with you. I agree with you, but I understand the logic by making him so mustache twirly evil for really no reason.
Well, but that's the thing is, if they were going to do that, then I wish they'd played him more mustache twirly evil, right? Sure. I do think, we talked about like, some of the MVPs. I will say right now, like I mentioned Amy Ryan, obviously one of our great actresses, feeling fairly wasted and just getting really one scene. But I definitely also thought this movie was kind of a waste of Rob Lowe, because I know Rob Lowe can be kind of more over the top and more comedic, and I just thought he was a very generic, boring bad guy because they weren't making him like overly interesting. So yeah, it's just like, I don't know. That's what kept slowing the movie down for me. Is I was just like, either go more over the top with this or spend less time on it.
Speaking of evil in the movie, did you like the lesson in having a deadbeat dad? And like how it's admiration at first, and then you get faced with reality and they still just fucking suck, so you drive through their house and basically scream "fuck you, dad" while you drive off. I like that.
Yeah, there's also a weird thing on that same like dad storytelling level. So Barry Pepper plays the sheriff of the town who is dating Trip's mom.
Yeah.
And like I felt like, did you get the sense that maybe something was missing and some scenes were cut out? Because he's never played like that evil or that like bad or anything, but Trip like just does not like him at the beginning. And I get it, right? It's just the standard thing of like, you don't like your mom's new boyfriend. But There's also some obvious tension between them. Like when he first comes home, they're kind of like, curt to each other and kind of rude to each other. And then later when Trip calls him and says, "You got to come to my junkyard. I found this monster." And then the monster's not there. He's basically like, dresses down Trip. And he's like, I knew you were a failure like your dad and all this stuff, right? And then like the moment in the third act where suddenly like Rick, the sheriff, just decides that he's on Trip's side kind of comes out of nowhere.
It does.
It's really unjustified. And it just feels really weird then when like Trip and him have this like heartfelt moment near the end when, like over the walkie-talkie. So like it felt like, I don't know, I just feel like something got cut out there or something because it just felt like too simplistic. I don't know.
I agree with you. I mean, I do think that this movie is a tight 105 minutes.
Yeah.
And it wastes no time, which is something that I want from a movie like this, right? I want them to trim as much fat as possible. I understand from our failure to franchise critique brain, we would prefer to have those scenes in. But then also, if I just put my, Dumbo family brain in, and I just want to see more, I want to see more trucks, and maybe less things that are depressing, like maybe I don't want to be reminded of, so much so that the deadbeat dad and then like the shitty stepdad as well. So maybe they thought that people were like, oh, there's too many bad dads. So I don't know. But point taken. I absolutely I see your critique. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's like I just have like a lot of small things like that, and again, they are. I'm acknowledging they're small, and like I'm not saying like I'm saying these fixes would probably make me more into the movie. I don't know ultimately that they would make the movie that much more successful or anything.
Sure.
But even like Burke, the main henchman, Holt McCall, how do you say his name? McElney, whatever. I like that guy. I don't know how to say his name, but I like him. I've actually really always wanted to see him play Frankenstein's monster. I feel like he'd be perfect for that. But I also wish he was like maybe just a tad more comedic or something here, because again, I just think like, he's a good heavy. He's always a good heavy.
Yeah.
But there's just nothing that dynamic about his character other than he's just like the tough guy that keeps showing up and like wanting to catch Creech, So it's just like everything, like a lot of the stuff with that storyline felt underdeveloped for me. But then whenever we would cut to just Trip and Creech, having fun and like the montages and making the truck and everything, that's when I got into it.
Totally. Yeah, I understand. You want everything dialed up just a smidge.
Yeah.
In action, playfulness, sinister villains, everything. If it's just dialed up a bit, I get it. I guess, yeah, like you're right. It's just a bad timing of the film. 2015 to 2017 really wasn't that time. Truly.
Yeah.
What would have made the movie a 4-star masterpiece? Is if Danny Glover plays Mr. Weathers. He's the guy who owns the junkyard, and he's in a wheelchair, right?
Yes.
You know what would have made this a 4-star masterpiece? If Creech entered his wheelchair and then, fucking drove him around everywhere in the action. And we got a CGI Danny Glover on a CGI wheelchair. I would have loved that.
Can I ask you mentioned earlier that you found Lucas Till like really kind of like believable in terms of like, his just overall persona and his relationship with Creech. Did you find him believable as a high school senior?
No, of course not. No, he's 35 years old.
I know. It was like one of those things where I had to look at, like, he was actually like, I think he was like 26 or 27 or something when they made this. But like, and like Jane Levy being 1 year older. They don't do him any favors either, where the first time you see him, he's like actually on the bus.
He's on the short bus, which is my favorite part.
First of all, not only is it a short bus, but like they made this, I can't believe they did this. They made the bizarre decision to have every other kid on the bus be actual high school age. And then he's on the bus too. And I seriously thought like, okay, are we going to find out that he's this older guy who his life sucks so bad that he has to ride home on the bus with all the kids? But then later they say something. I was like, oh no, oh my God, he's supposed to be in high school? It's crazy. But it was kind of, it makes me laugh because it's more reminiscent of a time where that was always the case, right? Yes. Where like 30-year-olds played high schoolers. Like that's funny, but it's just, I couldn't believe they actually like didn't try to like cast the other high schoolers in the bus to look more like him.
Well, I know I mentioned the short bus joke there, but the reason I brought that up is because of that. Because he's older, and then he's on this bus, and everybody looks really like young, and then you're thinking, you're like, okay, has he been like left behind a few years? So it's funny. I said that to Brittany. Brittany is a farm girl. Her family has had farmland for forever, and she actually told me, she goes, this is a throwback to growing up in a small town of like everybody wanted to be on the big bus, but if you were late, and there wasn't enough buses to come around, you usually get stuck with the short bus, and people would actively avoid getting on the short bus. So it's just pretty funny that like she was like, oh, this is actually like, this is true to form, which is funny. So not doing any favors by casting almost a 30-year-old man, and also with that young redheaded kid friend. Which did get a laugh out of me, though. I do like that little kid. That was funny.
It's strange because like it's an easy change, right, to just not make them high schoolers. Like, right, there could be some other reason they like know each other. But whatever. Like I'm not gonna I'm not overly crapping. I'll give this way another compliment though.
Sure.
You know what character I do like, and like, look, I'm a simple man. I like a simple character arc when it's effective, and I will say that's the Thomas Lennon character, Dr. Dowd. Yes, I'm always I'm a sucker for a redemption arc for a villain that comes from like a good place and from a good heart, and right, like, so like, you know, he is the scientist who's working for Terravex. When they capture these creatures, he's like the one who's like kind of experimenting on them and trying to discover what makes them tick. And as he discovers that they're actually really, really intelligent and that, you know, they have this like hive mind where they communicate with each other, he starts to feel for them. And when Rob Lowe says we have to kill these things, I like, again, it's very, very simple. It's very kids movie 101. But do I get on his side when he goes like, no, I'm actually going to help our heroes? And then it's also Thomas Lennon. So like, he gets to be like the comic relief in the third act, and Thomas Lennon is very good at that. So like it all works. So yeah, I point to him as like another highlight for the movie because I love that character arc, and I just always like seeing Lennon too. He's just a good screen presence. So yeah, that all worked for me too.
No, I agree. I wrote down. I almost cut you off when you were talking because I got excited that you were going to talk about Thomas Lennon. But no, I love that he's just easily turning good. Has one of the better arcs of the film, and again, simple messaging for kids. You know, don't kill things we don't understand. You know, that's nice. Also, the funniest bit of comedy in the film is obviously Thomas Lennon, but there's one moment, and I hope you caught it, but it's a physical comedy that made me burst out laughing. They're getting up into the monster. They're getting into the monster trucks for the big action climax, right? And Thomas Lennon jumps onto the monster truck, jumps on the wheel, goes through the windshield, everything, sits down, and then just like opens up the door.
Yeah.
I burst out laughing at that. And he just does it so it wasn't like, it was obviously like his idea to go through this huge physical thing to get into the monster truck through the window, and just open up the door that it was open the whole time was great. I love that.
I thought you were going to point out too, and again, this comes back to me being a simple man, but I thought you were going to point out to the moment during the final scene. So we should say the action climax is like, they have the 3 monster trucks now because it's the 3 creatures. Trip driving one of them, Jane Levy's Meredith driving another, and Dr. Dowd, Thomas Lennon driving the third. And there's a sequence where they have to make this like crazy jump or something, and they accomplished a jump, and we see Trip and Meredith, like we cut to them, Trip's cheering, Meredith's cheering, and then we cut to Dowd, he just vomits.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not above a good vomit joke. Great. So did I like that? Yes, I did.
Yeah. Again, you said it before. This is kind of one of those movies, you know, we don't really have a lot to talk about, but you know, there is a simplistic joy in such a simplistic movie. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And let's go to the question that we ask is like, does this deserve a franchise? Like, did this deserve to be, you know, longer and go on for a couple years, like a trilogy of sorts? And honestly, like, I like this movie quite a bit, but it's really just a good one-off movie, in my opinion. Like, even the way that it resolves, like, you know, spoilers, I guess, for monster trucks, but, you know, the heroes prevail, and the creatures are reunited with their other creatures, and they go live in the Earth again. And Trip like has this monologue that is like, you know, I always know where to find you, and then like kind of drives off with Meredith in his now souped up monster truck. And it just kind of like, it was just like a nice buttoned up ending. And I don't exactly know, like, what would you do with a sequel? I don't really know.
That's right. Like, it's weird because like they came up with a really cool concept, but it's almost a concept that like just destroys the idea of a sequel or a larger franchise. Yes. Because the gymnastics you would have to do narratively to have a reason for, I mean, I can understand, okay, Trip, you know, goes back and like visits Creech again, and like, you know, and like I can understand the storyline that would bring Trip and Meredith back to meeting these creatures again. But man, the gymnastics you would have to pull to like get these creatures back into trucks for some reason. Like, why would they need to do that? You know, like it's not like they're not inherently attracted to these trucks. I mean, I guess Creech kind of was, but it's more about how Trip realizes like the benefit of this and uses Creech as his truck, and then over time learns that Creech actually, you know, is more than just that. And then they put the other two in the trucks because they realize this has worked. But I don't know why that would become just a natural part of their being, where it's like, hey, let's make them monster trucks again. Like, I don't know, if you had to do that every time, it would, I don't know, you'd be pushing it. You know what I actually think would be better for this? Because I mentioned earlier how I was going to say whether I thought this should be a franchise or not. I'm with you in that I don't think you can do Monster Trucks 2 or 3. However, if this movie had come out in the 80s, as I said, like what might have been different is we probably, if it had been a success, we would have got a Monster Trucks cartoon. Because like so many live action movies were turned into cartoons at that point, and you could kind of just like retell the story of the movie through the cartoon, and then it's just like weekly adventures of like Trip and his Creech and his friend Creech who lives in his truck. Like this would work really well as a kid's cartoon every week when you don't have to worry as much about the realism and like the storylines to the same level. So that's actually where I think the potential, you know, future for this franchise was, but not in like a trilogy or any more movies.
No. Animation is a good place for it to have stayed. Or gotten to at least. Or they could have switched up the vehicles, but then you lose the monster truck, you know, kind of verbiage. Like, you know, if they're in the subterranean Earth, maybe they have to go down to their, you know, dwelling to save them for something. And, you know, all of a sudden now you got speedboats or something, you know.
Monster helicopters. He spins his tentacles around really fast.
That'd be great, actually. I would love that. That would be awesome. So yeah, no, changing to different vehicles would be cool. Animation's cool, but yeah, this story works like I was about to say, but they did make a bunch of Free Willies. But this story works like E.T. E.T. It was a one-off. You know, he went home.
Yeah, sometimes
so does Creech.
Sometimes you just want the happy ending to be a happy ending, right?
Yes.
Like let Creech and his family just go and be happy now. Like I don't need them to keep getting pulled into further adventures where they have to deal with all these stupid humans. You know, humans suck. Like Creech and his animals got it right, and like those creatures have it right. Just stay subterranean.
Yeah. The sequel has Jane Levy birth Creech, and all of a sudden it's revealed. Oh my god!
Well, now see that sounds like a movie I would like, but not the same kind of movie. So
no, that would, especially starring Jane Levy. I want to bring that up for a second. More praise for her, because the last movie I saw her in was for this podcast. We rewatched Evil Dead from 2013. A movie that we both quite like, and Jane Levy goes fucking off the chain in that movie in a lot of ways. She starts out as a drug addict, and then just a fucking bloodied up, you know, final girl. And then you watch this, and she is again the most sweet, charming girl ever. And it's quite wild. I was so impressed by the range of that. I really, really was. She was awesome in this.
I think I mentioned in our Evil Dead episode that for me, like my Jane Levy story really started with seeing her in Suburgatory, the show she did, and she was really funny on that. And so I was really excited when she got cast in Evil Dead. And then obviously she followed up Evil Dead with Don't Breathe. So I was like, okay, she's like becoming a cool, like, you know, scream queen. And then seeing her in this, I didn't really watch her like musical show. But I heard good things about it. I heard she was good at it. So it really does feel like maybe one of our more like underutilized actresses, like Hollywood. Come on, there's a short supply on Jane Levy. Unfortunately, I think we need more for sure. So
and she played off Creech so well too. Like again, actors when they play off of something that's not there, it can really be a death sentence for your film. You know, like either it really works or it really doesn't. But there was a scene in this where when Creech is full of caffeine and gasoline, basically, right? And he's like going crazy with the truck, and his like eye comes out of the dashboard, and like Jane Levy pushes him back in, and the way she says the line, "Oh gosh, I touched his eye," it was just like so funny and real, and she just totally sold it. She totally sold it.
Well, you know what? She plays off a Creech well, but she also plays off a Trip well, and I will say I think that the biggest testament to her is that. I agree with you. I don't think Lucas Till is bad in this. I think the problems are more on a script level because his character isn't written that great. I think he's doing his best, and I like him as Havoc. I do think he's just got kind of this like, you know, decent natural charisma.
Sure.
But his character is like so kind of single-minded, and like I said, I was being flippant to making a joke earlier, but he is so dismissive of Meredith at the beginning, and like because, you know, the elements of his storyline with Rick and like his dad are kind of underdeveloped in the movie. I will say for like the first half of this movie, I think Trip kind of comes across a little bit unlikable. But this is a testament to Jane Levy, because like you still always believe her like having the crush on him, and honestly how likable she is and how accepting she is of Trip, that's what actually helps you as an audience member start to like really come around on him and cool on him. I think it's entirely through her. Like you fall for her and you start to see like his inner like humanity and goodness through him. There's like that really nice moment. It's very, very brief and very small, but these are the kind of things I'll like clue into when I watch a movie. I do love the scene where she so the whole thing is she's like his tutor, and she's like really good at biology, and he seems like he knows nothing about it. And then later when he's like explaining to her how Creech controls the car, he talks about what you mentioned earlier about how Creech will like wrap his tentacles around like the wheel, and he says like, you know, he's got these little things on his tentacles, cilia, right? And the look she gives, and where she's like, "Oh my God, you know what cilia are?" And she goes like, "Oh, you're not dumb." And he actually plays that really well too, where he goes like, "Huh?" Like he didn't know she thought that he was dumb. But like that's the moment where you're like, you that's actually the demarcation point where you go like, okay, this guy's not an asshole anymore. Like, and she sees something new in him, and now I do too as an audience member. That's really on her. So yeah, she's the heart of this movie by far. I thought like Creech is my favorite element, but yeah, on a human level, she's like kind of the beating heart of that narrative.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like this conversation. I think it's, you know, obviously I'm a little warmer on it, but I think this is a movie that was pleasant. You know, it was nice to get one of these for Christmas, really.
Well, yeah, it's like, that's like when I like I said, again, I don't mean that in any negative way where I say if I was 10, I would like this more. I think I just, maybe my slightly more adult bitterness and cynicism was getting in the way with some of it. And like I said, I really think I would have fallen for it if there was like a couple more scenes where like, you know, like you said, like the idea of Creech getting high on gasoline, like if that led into a whole sequence where he like gets the munchies then, you know, and like, you know, they tear into like a grocery store or something. If you had sequences like that, or they have to drive through a mall, right, and all those kind of antics, I think I would have totally fallen for it. Missing those things, it's just what kept it to me. But I do think if you have young kids and you're like looking for like a new movie that's not the same like 10 things they've been watching over and over, try this one. Why not? You know?
I agree. 100%. I agree. I thought about that being like, this is a movie that, you know, when me and Brittany inevitably do, you know, have a kid, this is one that I would throw on. You know, I would say this was fun for me too. And that's usually what a lot of parents are lacking with their film choices with their kids.
Yeah.
You need one for you as well. So,
yeah, that's my biggest takeaway. Is as I said, I said this at the very beginning, but like I could see not thinking this is the greatest movie ever, but you know, as like I'm a testament to, I just can't imagine watching this movie and being like so angry about it or thinking it's so terrible, because it is like, at its worst, it's very competent at what it's doing. It's a very competent, very, as that review said, adequate family film. Yeah. So like it definitely did not deserve the reputation and like the just total like shitting on it. This is really a movie that was a victim of a bad reputation before it even came out. And I don't think people ever gave it a fair shot. And I think with a fair shot, you would walk away at least slightly charmed by it, if nothing else. So
there's a lot of that. I think I rail against this to you, especially with internet snark. You know, don't get me wrong. I am not innocent either in the snark, but there's sometimes where the snark gets so big, a la Avatar, that it just friggin' annoys the crap out of me. you know,
it's funny, it's not to cut you off, but there is a moment at the end of the movie where Trip ends up in the water with Creech, and suddenly Creech becomes fully like bioluminescent and is like helping him, get out of the water because Trip is potentially drowning. When that scene happened, I actually said to Liz, "This is just like Avatar," which I was being a little sarcastic, but it was right. It was very like reminiscent of like Avatar: The Way of Water. Yeah.
Well, the moment he became bioluminescent, I looked at Brittany and said the same thing.
Well, no, but yeah, what you said about like the internet snark, it's also, and I know this is another thing you and I have railed against, is the overall movie discourse nowadays is everything has to either be, it's all binary, right? It's either it's a great movie or it's a terrible movie, and there's no middle ground. And this to me this movie is the ultimate like positive example of a middle ground where it's like, yes, it has some flaws. Yes, some things aren't as developed as they could have been. Yes, it's like kind of coming up short on what it's going for in some degrees, but also it's too effective and it's too charming and it's too okay to be dismissive of. So like we need to allow movies to just be like pretty good. Like that's, and I like a lot of pretty good movies, and it's weird to me that people have gotten to the point where they're like, oh, it wasn't the best thing ever, so it's just a piece of shit. And I think that's, again, a mentality that probably got in this movie's way, which is like so unfair, because this is not a piece of shit movie. It's just a movie that, like, you know, maybe is not 100% on everything, but I don't know, Creech rules. Jane Levy's cute, you know, like it's got a all good cast doing work. Did you play the game I played where during some sequences with Barry Pepper, I would just close my eyes and he sounds exactly like Matthew McConaughey? It was pretty crazy.
Oh, that's funny. I'll have to watch some scenes again. The binary way of thinking, you know, the thumbs up, thumbs down, it's become a little exhausting, especially because, you know, Hollywood and movies were built on, you know, 2.5 to 3 star films. You know what I mean? Like it's okay to escape for, like I said, 105 minutes to watch, you know, a boy and his squid. You know, I think that's totally fine, and it's charming, and I hope people that are listening to this give it a shot. You know, check it out. There's no reason not to. Because, this really is your only shot for monster trucks, because, well, Thomas Lennon was contractually obligated for 2 more movies. Mm-hmm. So his arc that we quite enjoyed would go on, and maybe he was going to be, you know, like the scientists in Avatar. Which is
I thought that as recently as 2022, he was talking on Twitter about how he's still under contract for 2 sequels to this. Thomas, I think you can move on. I don't think you need to worry about it. I don't think you're going to get that call anytime soon. But yeah.
Could you imagine if they do it again and they still have Lucas Till as a high schooler?
Why not? You know, like last time I saw him, he looks pretty much still the same. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of maybe the only other way you could do this, right? Is just like another person finds another one of these things. Like, and I don't know. Like, it's weird because this is the kind of movie that it's strange because it's not. I've seen that it's developed a little bit of a cult following. I don't even think that's enough of a cult following to where it'll get remade or anything in the future. No. But again, maybe that's to its benefit, where we're just saying like, this is a movie that for decades to come is going to be this like little movie that exists that's like kind of there ripe for like discovery. So maybe people will keep stumbling upon it on a streaming service and go, what's this Monster Trucks movie? Well, I'll just throw it on, and it'll keep finding people go like, oh, that's not so bad, you know? Yeah. So
the same way I feel people should think about E.T., you know?
Yeah.
E.T.,
yeah,
that's not so bad.
This should be as big as and you know what? I'm just gonna say it. This isn't even like, for me, this isn't sarcasm. This isn't irony. Creech, about 1,000% cuter than E.T.
Oh my God! Of course.
This has always been my thing with E.T. is I always say this to friends. I'm only half joking where I say like, they're like, why don't you like love E.T. like the rest of us do? Why do you think it's just okay? And I always say like, you know what? I'd probably like E.T. a lot more if I didn't think E.T. looks like a shriveled ball sack. Like, I just don't find him like visually appealing. I know a lot of people think he's cute. I know if you just give something big eyes, they're supposed to be cute, but E.T. is more scary to me than cute.
During our Mac and Me episode, I think I'd mentioned to you that a close friend of mine, her biggest fear on Earth is E.T. You cannot send her pictures of E.T. She will cry immediately. So, fucking Spielberg, you know, you're not all that good.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? It's about time someone knocked Steven Spielberg down a couple notches.
I heard
we've been talking about all this time.
I heard so many podcasters say that Wicked was way better than West Side Story. So you know what? Spielberg, retire.
Yeah. Maybe you should take some lessons from Chris Wedge.
Yeah.
I don't see Spielberg out there.
The director.
Yeah.
I was like, who the fuck is Chris Wedge?
I don't see Spielberg out there voicing Scrat.
Dude, that's legacy, bro.
Do you think
isn't it? Isn't 8?
I think so, yeah. Something like that. Ice Age 24 or whatever it is up to. Do you think that on set, do you think he ever directed any scenes in like Scrat's voice? Do you think he like yelled cut and just like, well, I'm not going to do my Scrat impression because I just can't, you know?
Not in his voice, but probably dressed up as. Okay. All right, we got to get out of here. Before we go crazy. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed it. Check out Monster Trucks. I think we both gave it I know we both gave it a positive to good review. Check it out. Next time on Failure to Franchise is we continue with Trev and Chris-tmas. Trev gifted me Power Rangers from 2017. So we're sticking in the year of two failures, so to speak. So we will be looking at 2017's Power Rangers. So follow along at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2FPod. That's on all the socials. So like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. A star rating would be great. And just join the tribe and hit that subscribe. And keep on with Failure to Franchise and Trev and Chris-tmas.
We'll be back next Tuesday.
That was bad.